Appreciate you playing that. Let's see, I came in here and there was hardly anybody here at first, and earlier, and Joe Paul said they were all up in Golden State, and I got a text from preacher saying the same, that half of the people are gone. And Brother Joe Paul said that that's like the people at Pentecost. They were ones that weren't there, and they missed out on the sermon, the greatest sermon, and they missed out. And no, he said it was like the people that came to the ark or didn't come to the ark, and they missed out. They just missed out. So, but you're a privileged group right here. You're a privileged group. And I don't like just coming up like I like to do all the extra stuff so I can get a little bit warmed up or something with my doing here. But it's okay. I just try to help me out a little bit. And I want you to know that I joined the choir. Did you notice that? Have you noticed that? And hopefully you've noticed that. You probably heard me, that's for sure. But there is some room for others up there. There's a whole back row there that we started last Sunday night, and a whole lot more can come up there. And so if God speaks to you, that'd be a great thing. Just needs you to help out a little bit. That'd be a good thing. Let's see. Take your Bible, look over to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 12. 2 Samuel chapter 12. And this is a Bible study. This is a few... Actually, tonight is just a few things I had that I like studying my Bible, and I get a thought, and then I start looking everywhere in the Bible for it, and I start collecting stuff, and stuff. Sometimes I get to it and I realize it has nothing to do with whatever, and I throw it out, and you know how you do, because I want to know God. You know, I kind of want to know how he thinks, how he thinks on everything. I want to know. It's sort of like, it's like dating. When you date somebody, you try to know, the good things they like and things they don't like, and then you try to get a little bit more. You want to know their feelings about things and how they're intense and all that kind of things. You want to get to know them a little more. And by the way, dating doesn't stop with marriage. You just keep on going. And when the marriage stops, or when the dating stops, that's when the marriage stops. So careful. And so you just keep on dating. And I don't want to use the word dating, but I'm kind of like that with God. I want to know him, and I don't think it ever ends, because I want to keep knowing him. And I think that's the way it is tonight. I'm going to give you something that's not going to change your life. It's not a big doctrine. And if I get things wrong, then please forgive me, because I probably do, and I do once in a while I get things wrong. I think I did that a few years ago, I'm not sure. But 2 Samuel chapter 12, and here's a story that, we know this story, we know how the big point of this story, but it also means some other things, some things that we get a story within the story. And 2 Samuel chapter 12 is one of those things. I want you to think for a moment. I want you to put aside all your preconceived ideas. Because what we do is we kind of look at God and see how he thinks like us. And we ought to try to think like he thinks rather than what he thinks like us. And I want you to get this idea of thinking, try to understand how God thinks. Here's a story in 2 Samuel chapter 12. And it's about David and having an affair with Bathsheba, and he wanted to kind of brush it aside a little bit and didn't want to forget it, but Nathan came after him. Remember that? And remember the story how Nathan came and he had a story. Remember, he had the story that he was going to talk about. And look at there in verse number 1. It says, "And the Lord sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him and said unto him, There were two men in one city, the rich and the other poor. And the rich man had exceedingly many flocks." So he had a lot of animals. The rich man had lots and lots of animals. But then he says the poor man had nothing. Had nothing at all except one little ewe lamb, which he had brought up and nourished up, and it grew up together with him. So it was not just one lamb. It was a pet, wasn't it? It was kind of a pet. and with his children, and it did eat of his own meat. I mean, that was at the dinner. He'd sat there at the dinner room table, and he'd feed it from the table, perhaps, or maybe it sat in one of the chairs. Who knows? And he drank. Notice this. It says, and he drank of his own cup. You ever done that with your pet? Say, here you go, drink up here. You know, he's pretty close to this pet, very close. Okay, and was unto him as a daughter. Pretty close. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and spared to take of his own flock and of his own herd, to dress it for a wayfaring man that was come unto him. But he took of the poor man's lamb, and dressed it for the man that was come unto him. And David's anger was, and he heard the story, that's the story. And David stopped, and he was angry. David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, as the Lord liveth, the man that hath done this thing shall surely die. I mean, he was pretty mad. You know, affectionately loving pets, and by the way, that's what I'm going to speak on tonight, about pets and people. And it's a great truth, isn't it? Great truth. Pets and people. How many of you have pets? You have a pet. Okay, lots of you have pets. How many of you have your pet that's inside pet, an inside pet? You have an inside, it's dwindled down a little bit. How about pets that you sleep on your bed? You have pets that sleep on your bed. Anybody like that? Half of you just don't want to raise your hand, right? You know that, right? And how about this? How many of you, of those few there, because if you sleep on your bed, you probably do this too. How many of them let them, I say, kiss you, but they would lick you, right? Right? Okay. We got about 2 people there, and the rest of you are liars. But I think using this illustration that Nathan had here shows that I think pets were a common thing in that day. We don't ever think about them in Bible times. But I think because Nathan used that as an illustration, it shows that, you know, that was a thing that happened that day. And maybe even David, you know, the way David reacted to it, he also had that same feeling that there were pets. And by the way, these were 2 men of God who certainly knew how it would hurt to lose a pet, right? Otherwise, why would Nathan say that? You know, if it was somebody that David might say, "Oh, just kill that. You know, it's a good thing that thing was gone. It was an ugly dog anyway," or whatever, ugly lamb or anything. But he had an affection for somebody's pet, didn't he? And it reacted to him. Look over to Genesis chapter 9. We're going to look at a lot of scripture here and see if I can get through this real quick. Nathan's story of killing someone's pet made David extremely upset. And David thought a person who did such a grievous thing ought to be put to death. I mean, that's going really far, isn't it? Because such a man had no feelings or pity, he said. He equates the life of a pet to the life of a man right there, didn't he? He said, well, if he's going to kill his lamb, that man needs to go to die as well. And we wouldn't even do that in America. You know, might fine the guy or put him in jail or something, I don't know. But after the flood, God made a covenant relationship with mankind. But notice also, Genesis chapter 9, you there? I'm not. He also made a covenant relationship with animals. And if you notice there in Genesis chapter 9, in verse number 8, it says, and God spake unto Noah and said unto his son and to his sons with him, saying, I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. And then he goes on, and with every living creature that is with you, of all the fowl and all of the cattle and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast on the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh of the earth be cut off any more by the waters of the flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token of the covenant which I have made between me and you. And then he adds, and every living creature that is with you, of perpetual generation. Look down at verse 15, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you. And he could have stopped there, but he said, and every living creature of all flesh. And he goes on. Why did God spare some of the animals? Did you ever think about that? Why did he have Noah build an ark? I mean, he could have just said, okay, we'll just wipe all the animals and I'll recreate them. Just forget it, right? I mean, it would have been a whole lot easier for Noah, wouldn't it? I mean, he could have just built had a 5-hour tour, the yacht, along the way. He could have just said, okay, hop on the ark or a yacht and go on. But he could have just recreated them. Look down at Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6 and verse number 17. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 17. Let's see if some other things. He says, and behold, Genesis chapter 6, verse 17, and behold, even I, do bring the flood of the waters upon the earth to destroy the flesh wherein is the breath of life from under the heaven, and every living thing that is in the earth shall die. Look at chapter 7 and verse 14. 7 verse 14. And they and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. That's the Democrats right there. And had to put the political thing in there. And every fowl after his kind, and every bird of every sort. And then verse 15 it says, and they went into in unto Noah into the ark 2 by 2, and all flesh wherein is the breath of life. Skip down to verse 21. It says, and all the flesh shall die and move upon the earth, both fowl and of the cattle and of the beasts, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, verse 22, and all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died. Look back to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. Remember, this is not giant truth. This is not, don't get me in trouble here. I'm just showing you some thoughts for you to think about animals, okay? And think about pets, especially pets. Because most of you love pets, right? Some of you don't love pets. You need to get right with God. But Genesis chapter 2 and verse number 7. And it says, and the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground. We've heard that before. And breathed into his nostrils the what? And man became a living soul. Now, never says that animals became a living soul. Animals never became a living soul. But it does say they have the breath of life. And we are unique from animals. We alone are created after the image of God. We're not animals, though the public school might want to tell you that. We're different. We're unique. We should be called the sons of God, God says in John chapter 1:12. And we should be called the children of God. And we alone are promised salvation through Jesus Christ. People are special in comparison to animals, but that doesn't mean that they mean nothing to God either. God used many animals to convey his thoughts in the Bible. We look at that all over the Bible, how that God used animals to try to convey what he thinks and what he thinks about. Dogs will love you no matter what you do to them. You can kick them, they come back to you, they love you. And so does God. I mean, we can do just about anything to God and he will not forsake us, will he? He loves us and will not forsake us. Look over to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, if you would. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I'm laying the foundation here. It's not really going anywhere, but I'm going to show you there. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I got tons of stuff on this subject, but I pulled out some of the things, and hopefully I have the time to do it all here. Ecclesiastes, where is Ecclesiastes? Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And we all kind of wonder where, when our pets die, do they go to heaven? People ask me, you don't think Fluffy's going to heaven? And I hate to say yes or no, so, but, they made a movie, I think Disney movie or something, yeah, you've all watched it. And will dogs go all to heaven? I know a couple of them that I've had. They're not going. I know they're not going. But who knows? I mean, who knows? I know some people that thinking, they're not going, but, But God can do anything he wants there. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 18. And it says, and I said in my heart concerning the estate of the sons of men that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Even one thing befalleth them, as one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. And what he's saying here is that we all die. People die, and then we bury them, and so do dogs. They have people cemeteries. They also have pet cemeteries. You ever notice that? And we bury people that we have nothing on them at all. However, Christ died for us, amen, and offered us salvation. And we, if accepted that salvation, we have a great promise to us. We have that promise that if we accept Christ, we're going to heaven, amen. That's unique. That's very unique. My sister, a week ago, she's been fighting cancer for several years, many years, sure, about 6 years, I think, and got word that they put her on hospice last week. And I called her, or she called me, because I sent her, these roses, I sent her a dozen roses. And she called me to thank me for the roses, and she doesn't sound like my sister anymore. She doesn't have that bubbly spirit that she has. She loves God. And we'd always talk about how life is short, but heaven's forever. And that's the life that we have. And with Christ, people's spirits go to heaven. And without Christ, people's spirits go down into hell. But nothing is said about the spirit of an animal. Look at verse number 21. It says, and he says, look at verse 21. It says, Ecclesiastes 3:21. He says, who knoweth? There's a question mark at the end here. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of beasts that goeth downward to the earth? I mean, God kind of leaves it, who knoweth? He kind of leaves it open. Who knoweth? And we know that Ecclesiastes was written from a man's point of view, trying to sort things of life. Sometimes we think everything in the Bible is meant that God wrote, and that's the truth. But here's a man trying to figure out the things of life. So, who knoweth? Who knows? Pets bring a lot of joy into our hearts, don't they? And so why wouldn't God continue that joy up in heaven? It would seem like that was what God would do. And maybe he will. Who knoweth? Who knoweth? Look over at Isaiah, if you would. Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah chapter 11. We do know that the animals will be in the new earth. And if you don't like animals, it's okay, because the Bible says we'll all be changed. Even the people that hate cats, they'll all be changed. You'll start liking cats. I can prove it to you. I'll show you. And you'll look at Fluffy the cat, and you'll think, oh, I hate that cat, and you've kicked it 100 times. But in heaven, you'll embrace it and start putting your lips on that cat. It's gross, huh? It's going to be different in heaven. You see, you got to remember, animals didn't sin against God. People did. And wild animals were a result of Adam and Eve's sin, weren't they? And that's why there are so many wild animals out there and so few domestic animals. But in heaven, it'll be different. Look at Isaiah chapter 11 and verse number 6, if you would. Isaiah chapter 11, verse number 6. And I'm probably butchering every one of these verses, but I want you to see it. And you can figure it out, okay? Just look at you. Look at chapter 11, verse number 6. It says, and the wolf shall dwell with the lamb. He's talking about the future here. And the leopard shall lie down with the kid. not the kid like preacher says. It's not the kid. It's a small animal. And the calf shall lie, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together. And a little child shall lead them. Isn't it amazing that the little child is going to lead a wolf and a leopard and a lion? And then it says, and the cow and the bear shall feed, and their young ones shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like an ox. That kind of leads me to think that maybe we won't be eating, meat. I don't know. I mean, the lion's going to eat the straw. That doesn't sound good to me at all. And the suckling child shall play in the hole of the asp, and weaned child shall put his hand in the crocodile's den. There won't be any zoos in heaven. And God's original intent, think back here, God's original intent was that in the Garden of Eden, that man and animal would coexist. Remember that? I think Adam and Eve had lots of pets. I mean, they had pets like the lion and the wolf and all those kinds of pets, I think. Animals in heaven show that God loves pets, I think, to me. Look over to Numbers chapter 22, if you would. Numbers chapter 22. Animals have feelings. I have a dog, and most of you know my dog. One of these days I'm going to bring Riley in here. And I almost thought about tonight, and I thought, no, she'll misbehave, and I'm just better not. But she knows me. And when I get shirt, when I put a white shirt on, I pull a white shirt out of my closet, she runs into a crate. I have a crate that she's crate trained. And as soon as I pull that white shirt out, she knows I'm leaving to church. Well, she knows I'm leaving. One of these days I'll show her where I'm going. But I'm leaving, and she knows I'm leaving. And sometimes she can get my feelings. She knows when I'm happy, and she knows when I'm sad, and she knows when I'm going to go outside. She watches me. She looks after me, and she's very smart. She senses my feeling, and she has feelings as well, I think. Many of you know I have diabetes, and I have type 1 diabetes. I have a little thing on my side of me. It looks like a pager. People say, is that a pager? A lot of people have said that. And but I don't think they have pagers anymore. In fact, probably worth something on eBay if you get it. But it's an insulin pump. I have an insulin pump. It pumps insulin into me, and it keeps me going, keeps me alive, and keeps me going. And Riley has been trained years ago, trained to warn me when my blood sugars go low. And she knows, she can sense my blood sugar is going low. And she'll wake me up in the middle of the night, because diabetic in the middle of the night is the worst time. Most people have diabetes, if they die from going in a diabetic coma, because you're low and you sleep and you just keep going. But she knows, she can sense that. She can sense a lot of things about me. She senses my feelings, and she has feelings too. Some animals are closer to God than some people. And one of those animals is Balaam's donkey. Here in Numbers chapter 22. His donkey saw God, how God didn't want Balaam to go a certain direction. And so the donkey tried to stop Balaam several times, pushed her against the wall, tried to stop him. And every time Balaam would whip her and whip the donkey, and finally the donkey just said, forget it, I'm just sitting down. And the Balaam was about ready to kill that donkey. He was so mad at his donkey. He was mad. He was ready to hit that poor donkey. Look at Numbers chapter 22. You there? And look at verse 28. And it says, and the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam, what have I done to thee, that thou hast smitten me with these 3 times? You started talking to Balaam. Your pet ever talk to you? Don't answer that. It might lock you up here. My pet. I have 2 pets. I have a dog, and I also have a tortoise. And I'll get to that tortoise in a minute. But look at it says, and Balaam said, unto the ass, because thou hast mocked me. He starts answering, just like answer it, like he's used to the thing talking to him. And I would thee a sword in my hand, for now I would kill thee. He was mad. He was really mad because he wanted to go one way, and the donkey said, no, you're not going that way. You're just not going that way. And the ass said unto Balaam, am not I thy ass, upon which thou hast ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? I mean, that was just not a donkey. That was his donkey. You understand that? It was close to him, and we would call it a pet. Now, the word pet's not in the Bible, but we would call that a pet. And he says, was I ever wont to do unto thee? And he said, nay. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam and saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and the sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down his head and fell on his face. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, and he goes on, maybe that disobedient pet that you have at home, maybe he's trying to tell you something, amen? And then Numbers, God continues to speak, verse number 33. Look at it if you would. And the ass saw me, God speaking, and the ass saw me and turned from me these 3 times, unless she had turned from me, surely now also I had slain thee. And then he adds, and saved her alive. You see, Balaam's donkey saved Balaam's life. It was a service donkey, is what. The service donkey of that day. And God was ready to kill Balaam. But the donkey saved his life. Look at over Proverbs chapter 12. I mean, what would your pet say to you if they were to speak to you? There's a difference between animals. This is what I'm trying to get at. There's a difference between animals and people. And one of the big differences is this. Animals obey God, and people don't always obey God. There's a difference. Remember God commanding the ravens to bring Elijah food? He's hiding by the brook of Cherith. And the ravens did obey and did what God told them to do. You think, how did all those animals get to Noah? Get to the ark? Do you think Noah went around the world and collected them all? No, he probably said, I want you to go over here. And he probably directed the animals. It doesn't say, but he probably said, I want you to go here. Otherwise, he'd go all over the world trying to collect all those crazy animals. That was worse than getting them, and then try to keep them in order, right? But I think the animals came together and he put them on the ark. They obeyed. There are many pit bulls out there, and they're not bad dogs. They're just bad owners that made them bad dogs. Look at, where did I tell you to go? Proverbs? Proverbs chapter 12 and verse number 10. It says, and the righteous man regardeth the life of his beasts. Notice it says his beast. It doesn't say the beasts, or plural. It says a righteous man regardeth the life of his beast. But the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. And what I get from that is righteous men consider how to treat their pets right. You get that at all? You see that? And they are merciful and kind, and not wicked or cruel. Many people act like animals, and many animals act like people should act a lot of times. Look at over Luke chapter 12, if you would. Luke chapter 12. Nathan's story, going back to 2 Samuel, Nathan's story was not Nathan's story, was it? It's like when the preacher comes up here and preaches, it wasn't really the preacher's illustration. It was God that put the illustration in the preacher's heart. And since Nathan was the prophet, he was the preacher, probably the story came from God. And God knew how Nathan would think, and Nathan thought how David would think, and the reason why David was a man after what? Luke chapter 12 and verse number 6. It says, and five sparrows sold for 2 farthings, and not one of them is forgotten before God. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 farthings, and not one of them is forgotten before God? God says sparrows are cheap. They're cheap. Cheap little things to people. But to God, he kind of values them, doesn't he? Yes, God cares more about people than birds. Don't get me wrong here. You think, oh yeah, I'm an animal activist, I'm not an animal activist. But I want you to consider God's heart, what he thinks, how God thinks. We want God to think like we think. I want to think like God thinks. I want to know what he cares about, what he loves. Yes, God cares about birds more than animals, but he does care about birds. Birds, right? I remember when I was a kid, I got a wrist rocket. Do you know what a wrist rocket is? Like a slingshot that wraps around your arm. And I was shooting everything. I was breaking everything, breaking windows and everything. I was going. And there was one at my friend's house. There was a line that went down, a power line that went down from the power pole and down to his house. And I was shooting things. I looked up, and there was a little sparrow up there. I took my wrist rocket. I pulled the wrist rocket back, and I shot it. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could hit that thing. I shot it, and I hit it right in the head, and it came down. And it went down there, and I'm still thinking about it today. I think, that sparrow, he didn't need to get shot. He didn't need to get killed. I wasn't going to eat the sparrow, I had a friend give me some deer meat one time that they had killed, and it was delicious. I don't know if you ever had deer meat. It's great. But it was delicious. But if I had to kill the deer, I'd be a vegetarian. It's just me. I just can't look at Bambi and kill that Bambi. I just can't kill it. In my yard, I have a big yard. I have acre or so plus, and in my yard, it used to be grass out there, but the rabbits would come out at nighttime and eat my grass. And years ago, I got so mad at those rabbits, I thought, I've got to get rid of them. They're going to take my yard out. So I got a pellet rifle, and I don't want to get it with shotguns, but the neighborhood. But I got a pellet rifle, and I sat on my porch, and I waited, and sure enough, in the middle of the night, here come the rabbits hopping in. I thought, oh, right. And it had a scope on it. I scoped it out, and I looked at that rabbit, and then it did a terrible thing. That rabbit did a horrible thing. It turned around and started hopping toward me. So I said, shoo, shoo. It still kept hopping toward me. So it got so bad, it got about 10 feet. I looked at that, okay, mercy, you got it. I'm sorry, I'm just that way. Look at Psalms, you're in the Bible, look at Psalms 104. Psalms 104. Psalms 104. I can find where's Psalms here. Oh, it's back here. Psalms 104. God personally feeds the animals. All animals. Look at Psalms 104 and verse number 14. Psalms 104 and verse number 14, I think, is where I want to go. And he causeth the grass to grow for the cattle and the herb for the service of man, that he might bring forth food out of the earth. Look down to verse 21. And the young lions roar after their prey, and he seeketh their meat from who? Verse 26 says, There goeth the ships, there is a Leviathan. You know what a Leviathan is? It's like a sea monster. Some people think it's a whale. But who knows? And who thou madest to play therein. And then verse 27 it says, and these wait all upon thee, that thou mayest give them their meat in due season. They all wait, and it talks about a whole bunch of them. God cares for the animals. And God cares for the cow and the lions and the sea monster, and he cares for Beanie, and he cares for Cecil, and he cares for Jonah, and he cares for the whale. He cares for all of them. God's creation are all cared for by God. Look down to Psalms 50, back to Psalms 50 if you would. Psalms 50. I got to hurry here. Coming to the end here. Psalms 50. And you know why he feeds them? Because they belong to God. He feeds them because they're his. Verse number 50. And sometimes, not that we're killing his pets, although he'd get mad at us, but he does feed them. And look at verse number 10. It says, and for every beast of the forest is mine. Notice that. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains, and the wild beasts of the field are what? They're mine. God says they're all mine. And an animal becomes a pet when you what? You feed them. You know. I used to have a stray cat that come over to my house, and it wanted to be fed. And I said, I'm not feeding you because I don't want you as my pet. You know. And it spoke to me and said, forget it. I have a tortoise, like I said before, and that tortoise, from the first day I've had it for about 17, 18 years, and it was in my yard. It was like that size. And it was in my yard, walking across my backyard. I picked it up, and we put it in a box, and it became my pet. And then I gave it a name. I called it Shelly. His original name is Shelly. And there's probably never a tortoise like that named Shelly before. But I named it Shelly. And I fed that thing, and magically, that tortoise became a tortoise, and it became my tortoise. Just like that. So there's like a magic there, something more than magic. And now, today, I still have Shelly. Shelly lives in like a dog house out in my backyard. She has a great pen. Wonderful pen. I mailed it for her. And I'll go out there to feed her every day. I go out there to feed her, and I'll call her and say, Shelly! Don't look at me. I'll say, Shelly! And sure enough, you come over my house, you'll see Shelly will come out of the dog house looking for me. She's not looking for me. She's looking for the food is what she's doing. But I want to think that she's looking for me. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 10. Don't even turn there, but let me read this to you. It says, and he found him in the desert land and in the waste howling wilderness. He led him about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. You're in Psalms right now, right? Look at Psalms chapter 17. Psalms chapter 17. Zechariah, you're going to Psalm 17. Zechariah 2:8 says, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent unto me unto the nations, which spoileth you. For he hath touched you, toucheth the apple of his eye. David wrote this, David of all men, wrote this. He said in Psalm 17 verse 8, look at verse 8. He says to God, keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. Though God is not a respecter of persons, we have to admit that God does have some that he calls the apple of his eye. And pets, by definition, are very special, are favored animals, aren't they? We call them a favored person. We call them the teacher's what? And David wanted to be God's pet. David wanted that special, more than any other person. He wanted God to know him. And perhaps because David knew how it was to love his own pets. Are you God's pet this evening? Would you consider yourself as God's pet? Do you come when God calls you? When you're in the pew and you hear the preaching and God talks to you, do you stay in your pew or do you walk the aisle and talk to God at the altar? When God says, choir, or tithing, or soul winning, or whatever it might be. John chapter 10 and verse 27, we know this verse, all of us, I think. John chapter 10 verse 27 says, my sheep. He didn't say sheep. He says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. You see, we know he knows us, and we know him. One time, a friend of Abraham Lincoln's fell in a river in a thin ice, and Abraham Lincoln went into the icy river in order to save and rescue his friend. And Abraham Lincoln later wrote these words. He said, when I got to him out, he was frozen solid, shivering. He was shaking so hard that I wasted a half a glass of whiskey trying to aim it at his mouth. Must have been enough of it to get it in, though, since it seemed to bring him back to life. Abraham's friend, who he was willing to risk his life into the icy river, was his dog. We all admire Abraham Lincoln. We all know him. We love him because he defended those who could not defend themselves. And I'll close with this statement. Abraham Lincoln also said this. For what it's worth, he said, I care not for a man's religion, whose dog and cat are not better for it. Pretty amazing. Let's pray, Shelly. Heavenly Father, help us, Lord, to know you better. I don't know, Lord.